Now, Sky News can reveal that victims of grooming gangs are being denied compensation by a government scheme because of their criminal records. Our data and forensics team discovered that more than 11,000 victims of all types of crime have been denied payouts over the last decade because of their unspent convictions, and that includes children. A warning that this report from Alice Porter contains references to drug addiction and sexual abuse.
It happened every couple of days. Some of the stuff is now classed as rape.
Arthur was 5 when he was sexually abused by his babysitter. In 2008, he reported it to the police, but his abuser wasn't charged.
I started to use drinking drugs, and I used that as a coping mechanism.
Struggling with addiction, Arthur was repeatedly arrested for minor offences, such as making false calls to the emergency services.
I wasn't getting any support from any agencies, nothing like that. No one at all asked me, why is this man ringing the emergency services all the time? It was a cry for help, you know, I was just frustrated that I wasn't being believed. It destroyed my life.
Eventually, Arthur's abuser was convicted of multiple offences against children. Arthur tried to make a claim through the Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority, but was rejected because of his criminal record.
It felt unfair, it felt unjust, it felt, I was angry that, and I didn't see how they could not give me the compensation when the crimes were a petty criminal activity caused by what happened to me as a child.
The Criminal Injuries Compensation Authority is a government body which can award money to victims of violent crime, including sexual abuse. But if an applicant has a criminal record, they're automatically refused compensation with limited exceptions. Sky News' data and forensics team found more than 11,000 victims of crime over the last decade have been denied any compensation because of their criminal records or character. Where age was recorded, at least 348 children have been refused compensation because of their criminal records. At least another 130 children with criminal records had reduced awards, including 50 victims of sex abuse, 4 victims of brain damage, and 1 person who lost sight in an eye. The former Victims Commissioner says the scheme needs greater discretion.
It's the right principle not to compensate people who are voluntary criminals, but look, for instance, at the women for whom we're trying to set up a grooming gangs inquiry now. Many of those were controlled and done immeasurable damage by the groomers for a very long time and were forced to commit offences whilst they were in that grip.
The independent inquiry into child sexual abuse recommended that people with unspent convictions are not excluded from compensation where offences are linked to childhood abuse. Now Labour MP Sarah Champion has tabled an amendment to the Victims and Courts Bill with the hope of implementing this recommendation.
Victims of modern slavery are falling foul of this scheme because Seeker thinks it can make the rules up as it goes along. These people, who are very clearly recognised as victims and survivors, aren't getting the money that's owed to them. The system's broken and the ministers need to get rid of it.
A government spokesperson said last year more than £164 million was paid out under the Criminal Injuries Compensation Scheme to victims. Changes to the way we compensate victims have been considered by successive governments, and our priority must always be to treat all victims of violence equally. But equality seems out of reach for people like Arthur, impacted by abuse, unable to escape their pasts. Alice Porter, Sky News.
Well, Peter Garsden is president of the Association of Child Abuse Lawyers. Peter, good morning to you. What do you think when you see Alice's piece there?
Well, it's very telling, and it's very typical of a lot of my clients who have a desperate desire to be believed and to have justice. And when a government scheme doesn't allow that, they become very frustrated, understandably so. Arthur, I know, is my client, is very relieved that finally he's able to speak his truth and get his message across, because he's been unable to get justice through either the criminal injuries compensation scheme or the courts. I mean, I think it's worth saying that there were 2 consultations in 2022 and 2023, and all the respondents wanted a change to this law, but the present government has rejected both of those consultations and the recommendations of the independent inquiry. So I'm extremely pleased to hear that Sarah Champion is tabling an amendment to hopefully change the law and achieve some justice for these very vulnerable and damaged individuals.
Is your sense that the governments have walked away from changing the rules around this because it comes down to money?
Undoubtedly. I mean, if you read the government response to the both consultations, it's simply a fear that there'll be a sudden explosion of claims and it will cost a lot more money. You know, this government are very cost conscious, but at the end of the day, one has to decide what the priority is. And, you know, child abuse goes top of the list for me and tops everything. So I think it's a great shame that Arthur hasn't had any justice, and I hope I can help him achieve that in the future.
Alice's report identified 11,000 people who had been victims of crime who had been denied compensation because of their own unspent convictions. What do you think about that number? Do you think that that's about right, or do you think it could be more than that?
I'm sure that number is correct. I know Alice has gone into great strides to make sure that that's correct. But of course, you know, this covers a number of different areas, as we've already said, that, you know, victims of sexual exploitation, victims of child trafficking, and victims of child abuse. The one important thing is that if the conviction is related to the offence which they're applying for, then there should be discretion to ignore it. And it's very, very common for victims of child abuse to commit crime because they're so upset about what has happened to them.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I mean, how much thought is given to the linkage between, you know, the life that person then ends up leading because of what they've been through?
Yeah, well, there has to be some proof, obviously, that there is a causative link between the crime and the abuse. And that can be done by a psychiatric expert. The point is that from about 1997 to 2012, there was discretion, but a Conservative government in the 2012 scheme took it away. And there was an uproar when it happened, and just injustice continues, unfortunately.
Well, good to talk to you. Thank you for your thoughts on Sky News. Peter Carston.
Thank you.
We're going to take you to Johannesburg now, where the Prime Minister is addressing the G20. Let's have a listen.
London Coalition.